Good morning to you and welcome to the Vicarage here at Penn on this Wednesday morning. Wednesday equals day off for the Vicar, which means golf this morning. Looking forward to it, and the weather looks good and the course is open, so looking forward to that. I don't know what you're doing today, but I hope you have a lovely day today. Friends, we are working our way through the Gospel of Matthew, and the last few days we've been in chapter 5, 6 and 7, which are the famous Sermon on the Mount. And in chapter 8 we have this morning, the first few verses of it, Jesus comes down from the mountain and he encounters various people when he comes down. And interesting, the Greek is much more dramatic. I always think you need to feel the Bible as well as hear it, really, as well as think it. You need to feel it. And here it says, in the English it says, he came down from the mountain, crowds followed him, and there was a leper that came to him. The Greek is much more dramatic. He came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and behold, there was a leper. It's kind of much more dramatic than the English. So sadly, I can't read the Greek. I'll read you the English this morning. Here goes. Anyway, that's just a side note. Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 to 13. When Jesus had come down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and behold, there was a leper who came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I do choose, be made clean. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, in terrible distress. And he said to him, I will come and cure him. The centurion answered, Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes. And I say to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and the slave does it. When Jesus heard him, he was amazed, and said to those who followed him, truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west, and will eat with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. While the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, go, let it be done for you according to your faith. And the servant was healed in that hour. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right. In this reading this morning, Jesus encounters two people. And on the face of it, they couldn't be more different. They're both male, okay? But apart from that, one is military, one is not. One is well, he's well named, the centurion is well. The leper is very ill. The centurion will have been well-to-do and probably well off and so on. The leper almost certainly will have had very little money because he'll have spent it on doctors and so on. The centurion will have been sort of well thought of and have lots of friends and people kowtowing to him all the time. A centurion was a soldier in charge, an officer in charge of 100 soldiers, hence centurion. With the leper, on the other hand, lepers in those days, because of a kind of first century version of social distancing, used to have to keep apart in colonies, so other people wouldn't get leprosy as well. So you have two completely different. They are both male, but one will be rich, one's poor. One's military, one isn't. One is well, one is ill. One will have been rich, one will have been poor. One of which will have had lots of people around him kowtowing to him all the time. The other one will have had to live in some leper colonies somewhere. So you have two people, they're both male, but apart from that, they couldn't be more different, who meet Jesus in our reading this morning. But they do have various things in common which come out in this reading this morning. First thing to say, they both have a problem. In the case of the man with leprosy, of course, he's ill, it's a terminal disease, he would have been ritually unclean, and so on and so on and so on, and he had that. The centurion had a problem because his servant was gravely ill, and he cared hugely about this servant. Maybe it was an important lieutenant or whatever, we don't know. But anyway, this servant of the centurion is ill. So they both have an enormous problem. And you get the impression they'd both be kind of out of their wits with this problem that they have. So you've got two men, incredibly different, but they both have a problem. But what also do they have in common this morning? Firstly, both of them, because they've got a problem, they come to Jesus. The leper comes to Jesus. The centurion comes to Jesus. And I think, in a sense, that's something that we've often missed out on today, the importance of actually coming to Jesus. I think so often we somehow expect Jesus to kind of come to us, really. I think often that we have our agenda and we have our lives, and we expect Jesus to kind of clock into our agenda, to fit into our timetables. We expect Jesus often to do things our way, and we get disappointed when Jesus doesn't just always click into our agendas and do things our way. I think in in both of the cases, both the leper and with the centurion, both of them actually came to Jesus. And I think it's important today for us that we actually come to Jesus, that, it's important that we shouldn't always expect Jesus to click in with us, but we should, come to Jesus. And Jesus invites us to come, doesn't he? Come to me, all that travail and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. So I think it's important today that we hear that the importance of coming to Jesus, taking time out and actually coming to him. I think that's the first thing. Secondly, in both cases, in the case of the leper and in the case of the centurion, they both took tremendous risks in doing so, apart from just their busy schedules, I'm sure. In the case of the leper, lepers were not allowed to be anywhere, weren't allowed to be where there were people. They had to, as I say, social distance is what we call it these days. And yet Jesus surrounded by a crowd, and this leper comes in, and crowds are a nightmare for people with leprosy, because they in those days, because they just couldn't get. But this man is so keen to get to Jesus, he's prepared to take that risk and does it anyway. So he takes an enormous risk then. If he'd been found, he'd have been in real trouble. And likewise, but in a different way, the centurion, here we are, a senior Roman officer. How would it have looked in the gossip in the officer's mess and amongst his soldiers that here he'd gone to this god brother, this strange holy man, How would it have looked to his friends in the officer's mess? What would his reputation have been that he's prepared to do such a thing? So reputationally, as well as I say, his busy social schedule in trying to militarily rule an unruly country, he took an enormous risk as well. So both of them come to Jesus, and both of them take tremendous risks to do so. Next thing, they both also show tremendous faith, and I think it's the faith that we need to hear. The man with leprosy comes to Jesus and says to Jesus, if you are willing, you can make me well. In other words, he is absolutely convinced that Jesus has the power to make him well. He's absolutely, totally convinced that Jesus has the power. But he says, if you want to, you can. So this man with leprosy shows tremendous faith. He shows faith in the power of Jesus. He needs no convincing that Jesus has the ability. Jesus has got the power to heal him. So he's absolutely full of faith in Jesus in that respect. In the case of the centurion, he's so utterly convinced that Jesus can heal the man. He doesn't even think Jesus needs to come to his house, because he says, like, I give orders and they get obeyed. He's so convinced that Jesus has the power and the ability to make his servant better. He says, look, you don't even have to come to my house. All you've got to do is give an order and it will happen. So tremendous faith, such faith that Jesus doesn't even have to come all the way, that he's got the power to do it. So both the man with leprosy and the centurion show tremendous faith in Jesus. They're both absolutely convinced of the power of Jesus to be able to do such things. So they show and they demonstrate, and they demonstrate really well tremendous faith and trust in Jesus. But then finally, I think we also need to recognize that in both cases, Jesus came to them. That might not seem remarkable on the face of it, but you have to remember who these two people were. As far as many of Jesus's contemporaries in the kind of strict Jewish community at the time, these two people, both the leper and the centurion, will have been beyond the pale. The man with leprosy, because as I say, in those days you were ritually unclean. You couldn't be, or you couldn't socialise with people who had leprosy, because as I say, this social distancing. And if you got touched them, you might get the disease, but also you were considered ritually unclean, and so on and so on and so on. So, but nonetheless, Jesus is prepared to touch the leper. He comes to him like that, and he actually touches him with tremendous risk to himself. But also, Jesus is actually prepared to touch this person. And in the case of the centurion, of course, he was one of the occupying powers. Yeah, these were the people that had taken over our country, and destroyed our lands, and blah, you can imagine. And yet Jesus is still prepared to come to them. And I guess what it means is, if Jesus is prepared to come to the man with leprosy, and Jesus is prepared to come to the centurion, then maybe there's hope for us. Because Jesus is for everybody, whoever we may be, whatever state we may be in, whether we may be high or low, whether we may be well or ill, and however ill thought of we may be by anybody else, then actually Jesus loves us and is prepared to come to us. So, you've got two men here who are very, very different, who meet Jesus, but both with a massive problem. And I think we need to recognise that both of them come to Jesus. And actually, we need to hear again the importance of being prepared for us to actually come to Jesus. Secondly, these two men take enormous risks in doing so, which reminds us that faith is a risky business. The faith is not just about doing things the way they've always been done and keeping things as they are. It's actually about taking risks for Jesus sometimes. And actually, faith can be, and often is, a risky thing. Thirdly, both of these men, these very, very different people, demonstrate tremendous faith in the ability and the power of Jesus. And finally, in both cases, even though they may be considered by many to be the outcasts and so on, as far as Jesus is concerned, he's still prepared to come for them and be there for them and heal them and help them, which means that he's there for us today. God bless you. More tomorrow. Thank you for being with me today. Do please feel free, by the way, to share these messages with your friends so other people can enjoy them too. Have a lovely day, and God bless you.